My first top 10 songs list video of 2024 is one I've been wanting to do for quite some time. I've been wanting to talk about the Weeknd's best songs for quite some time. I also do want to do a worst to best at some point too. We'll get to that eventually down the road, but for now we're talking about the top 10 best Weeknd tracks of his whole career. Of course, he's had a pretty magnificent career that has spanned the course of the 2010s and beyond, and arguably he's bigger than he ever was, really, off the back of that After Hours album and how much love he got for Dawn FM too. It just feels like there is no limit to how big the Weeknd could get. He already is a mega star, but it really does feel like he's the kind of artist that could just keep churning out massive hits and becoming more and more of a classic, beloved pop artist as the years go by. I could really see it. Of course, there are two sides to the Weeknd, Saturday and Sunday. No, in all seriousness, we have two sides to the Weeknd. We've got the R&B side that obviously kick-started his career, the early days of the Weeknd, the massive influential mixtape series that he had running, which still to this day you can still feel has had such a huge impact on the progression of pop music in the 2010s, R&B music in the 2010s. I don't need to tell you all this. This is all kind of obvious stuff if you're aware of the Weeknd, really. But yeah, it was fantastic then. And then, of course, he went more in a pop direction, which was very much indebted to the Michael Jackson era, the 80s synth pop era as well. And yeah, you could love both sides equally or love both sides maybe a little bit more than the other, or either or, whichever you want to go for. And there's still so much to love in the career of the Weeknd because he's just been that consistently brilliant for the best part of his career now. Whichever side you land on will probably determine how your list would look. But for me personally, you may not necessarily agree with my list, my picks. I might not give a list out here that's going to be totally agreeable with everybody, but that's the fun of it. That's the beauty of it. This is my personal list and it's how I rank his best stuff. So let me know yours in the comments, of course. But just be aware that I think it's totally reasonable and fair to have a particular preference for each iteration of the Weeknd, and that's how we land at a list. Because, like I say, I think a lot of his fans might split opinions with certain things and certain songs. But yeah, this is going to be obviously my opinion. Please check out my Patreon as well. You can request videos like this in the future if you want to be part of this, part of my Discord server, part of other things too that I do have going on over on Patreon. You can request track reactions, all those kind of things. Please check it out because you can involve yourself in future videos like these. As always, we make a start with the honourable mentions. Got to mention Wanderlust from Kissland, which sadly for Kissland lovers, this won't be the most recognisable album that appears on this list. For me, Wanderlust is absolutely fantastic though, and it had to be an honourable mention. Love this track, but I know a lot of people do vouch for this album, Kissland, and vouch for this era, and some people even call it his best album too, which I think is pretty interesting. I personally don't agree with that, but it does get representation in the way of this track being an honourable mention. Also want to mention The Morning from, of course, the House of Balloons mixtape, a really wonderfully smoky, just kind of dirty, grimy little track that's got such a sleaziness about it. But I do love this track. This is a great song and was pretty close to making the top 10, but just about missed out. And then 3 tracks, all from the same album coming up, and the album is Starboy. I actually think this album's a little bit underrated, honestly. I think people do give it a bit of a bad reputation, but I actually think there's a lot of his best stuff on this album, as for the fact that 3 songs are going to pop up here. I want to mention A Lonely Night. I think this is a really, really catchy pop tune that doesn't really get its flowers. I think it's just ridiculously fun and upbeat, and yeah, can't really fault it. In the same breath, I do want to mention Secrets as well. I feel like these 2 tracks offer a very similar thing, just upbeat, banging pop music, and just go down as his most underrated tracks, honestly, of his career. People really don't pay attention to this album enough, I don't think, but I really love these ones. And then the final track from this honourable mentions list, as I always do, 5, and the final track from Starboy that I want to mention too, is False Alarm, which is one of his most batshit wacky songs ever that I still can't believe he even did. To be honest, it's just so off the beaten path. It's so random for the album. It's so random for the Weeknd. It's so out of place in all ways. But goddamn, is it so bloody good. I think this is a great riotous song. And that's it. They are the 5 honourable mentions that I wanted to mention here. And now we're going to get into the list. Starting with... 'Cause I've been the hardest to love. Yeah, Hardest to Love had to be on this list for me. I absolutely adore this track. One of the most subtle, earnest tracks from After Hours that I find to be super impactful with the lyrics, with the way he's singing. His delivery is really emotive and powerful on this track too. It feels really whimpery at times, and it feels like really vulnerable at times. But just he sells it so beautifully. Like, it is just a really, really powerful vocal performance, I think, in the fact that it is a bit more subtle than his usual stuff. But yeah, absolutely love it. I think the production is like outrageously good, honestly ridiculously good. Of course, One Tricks Point Never was all over After Hours and had such a huge influence on the way that album sounded, but goddamn, there's so many nice little details that pop up in the production. The kind of like almost drum and bass feel that this track has. It just has a totally fresh and crisp sound to it that is so rare to hear from the Weeknd. I mean, on this very album there wasn't really a song like this, and even across his career you can't really point to many songs like this, even if you could maybe say it has a similar vibe to other songs, but I don't think it sounds really exactly identical to anything he's ever done. Adore Hardest to Love. This one might be a little, really? You're putting this in his top 10? And I am going to do it, my friends. I am going to be the guy that says it's in his top 10, because I still to this day absolutely adore this track. And honestly, if you'd asked me like 4 years ago what my favorite song was from the Weeknd, it probably would have been this. This for the longest time was my favorite Weeknd track, and it has felt quite a bit lower down than perhaps it ever once was, because of how much I did used to love it. But perhaps Overplay has just brought it down a little bit for me. I played the song a lot over the years, but it is bloody good. Just that moment where the Weeknd really came to life and showed us that actually there's more to his game. He's got more in his locker than he was showing before. Just fully going unapologetically pop in just the most danceable and fun and groovy way possible. Like, the bass groove on this track is excellent. Just incredible from start to end. Again, pulling from that Michael Jackson era perfectly and selling it ridiculously well. Like, this song just is so ingrained in my brain, and I can't see a day where it won't ever just be ingrained. Like, it is just so ridiculously catchy. And yeah, there's going to be a bit of bias towards that pop side of the Weeknd on this list. I'm going to have to be honest with you, man. These are the songs I think I gravitate to a little bit more than perhaps some of his other earliest stuff, particularly from something like Echoes of Silence, which I think is good, but I do think I just gravitate towards this a little bit more. Segues nicely into number 8, which is one of his biggest songs ever and one of the most streamed songs ever in the history of like streaming. Save Your Tears. I do want to discount the Ariana Grande remix version. I personally never really thought that verse added anything to the song at all, even though when they do come together on previous tracks that they have done, they actually work really well and sound great on a track together. But for this particular one, I'm just going to go the solo version. I think Save Your Tears was absolutely brilliant without Ariana, to be honest with you. Just really well crafted 80s synth pop stuff. This, we do have a bit of a nostalgia for that sound and era, and it does seem to be a bias that we seem to have seen in the charts, particularly over the years. But if you're going to get anyone to be at the front, to be the leader, to be the charge of that sound, it's got to be the Weeknd, right? I mean, this ridiculously, it sounds so good. Like, the production, the vocals, the chorus, the transition into chorus as well is fantastic too. Yeah, I absolutely love this one. The sample is pretty underrated too. I don't think many people would recognize the sample, but if you listen to it, it's really nicely put in to the track well. I mean, I suppose there isn't much done with the sample, but I think to use what was there and turn it into this huge smash hit is pretty impressive. At number 7, we've got Wicked Games from the iconic House of Balloons. Have to mention tracks from this because it is a really, really exceptional piece of work from The Weeknd that has stood the test of time for me. I like it more than I ever did, honestly, and I always liked it. But good God, this track is so bloody good. That guitar, that kind of just roars so sexily. Is that a word? Sexily? It's so friggin' sexy, this guitar. It sounds so good. And you've got The Weeknd just kind of basically outlining everything about his personality on this track, man. He ain't hiding anything on this one. And I know there's always been like the talk of it being a character, that it's not actually who he is. But the fact that he sells it in the way that he does and makes it so believable, it makes it picture a person so perfectly. You know exactly the kind of guy you're talking about here, the sleazy sort of womanizer that is just kind of doing it all for himself. He's doing it because he needs confidence in himself, and at the same time he's kind of just recognizing that he's bringing all his pain and bringing all his shame. Honestly, shame is a great word to use here, because I do feel like this characterization of a track like this is so perfectly depicted by the film Shame. Like, if you've never seen the film Shame, you should watch that film. It's a brilliant film, and yeah, kind of basically showcases exactly who The Weeknd is or was pretending to be during this era. Oh my God, House of Balloons, man, at number 6, Holy Mother of God. What a track this is. Love the fact that this track just is so daring, like so early on too. I mean, this was like the first real glimpse of who The Weeknd was, and yet to have this on a mixtape and it just be so forward thinking and just so creative and eclectic with how it presents itself is really impressive. I mean, you'd expect this to be later on for an artist like this who maybe wants to start experimenting with their sound, maybe wants to push the boundaries a little bit further, but no, he just gave us this right out the gate, and good God, it's aged so splendidly well. I mean, the first leg of the track is fantastic, but then when you get to that switch up and that kind of crunchy, weird instrumentation, that kind of it just kind of starts clattering your ears. And his vocal switch up too, where he's like 7 on 7, that part sounds great. Just absolutely love what he was doing here. Just an absolute career-defining track that, again, showcased what he could do with the sound and how he could manipulate the sound in such a unique way. The talent was always there, man. We're in the top 5 now, and similarly to my Travis Scott video, you're going to have to hear me out here and just accept the fact that perhaps the biggest, hugest, massive song is going to make it high up on the list, because it just kind of has to for me. Blinding Lights is just a monumental moment in music, and I don't want to talk about the fact that it's popular, because that's not me describing how good the song is. I totally understand that, but I think it is just, again, showcasing how mega big The Weeknd can be, and how always good he's been at making these synthy pop 80s nostalgic tracks, but making them sound so good and so modern and so unique for our time at the moment. But Jesus Christ, man, to think this song didn't initially get its flowers and kind of started to flop a little bit and then had to bounce back later on is insane, because the moment I heard this track, I was like, this is a hit right here. This is obviously a hit. The clear sort of inspiration coming from Take On Me, or maybe even a song like I Ran. I mean, you could maybe combine both of those 80s tracks and you get this really with maybe Michael Jackson singing over it, and that's just a perfect combination of all those things, and you get Blinding Lights, I suppose. But yeah, just an incredible song, just ridiculously good. Never got old either. I mean, I was talking earlier about how I personally felt like I was getting a little bit too much from Can't Feel My Face, because I was hearing that a lot and played it a lot myself. And yet Blinding Lights, you could not escape, and you still have yet to been able to escape, because it is just that big. And yet I love it every friggin' time. I eat it up every friggin' time. It sounds as good as it did the first time I heard it, every single time. Just is so spectacular. Say I love you, girl, but I'm out of time. Number 4 now, we've got Out of Time from Dawn FM, of course. And one thing I want to say about this track that I absolutely just find so funny and I love is how it literally just took the instrumental from Midnight Pretenders and did absolutely nothing with it, and yet still remains to be one of his best songs. This isn't me like hating on sampling or, you know, accusing anyone of anything. Of course, the sample was cleared and that kind of stuff. But it does make me laugh how we can just do this in music. We can just take a song and do nothing with it and make a new song over that instrumental. It does kind of, I do find it funny, but even still, both songs are incredible. Both songs are amazing, and The Weeknd does his thing on this track right here, because again, with that kind of heartfelt delivery, that honesty coming through here, really is just The Weeknd through and through. Although I think, you know, kind of bringing the idea of there being another guy involved perhaps has always been something he's done. He does love to kind of bring that narrative to the table on a lot of his stuff, but goddamn, it's just so well done. And the vocals on this track are some of his most, honestly, like, daring vocals. Like, he is really hitting notes here and switching up his notes and his singing like so frequently across the track. Like, if you try and sing along to this song, which I'm sure if you're a Weeknd fan you have done many times, it's really friggin' hard. Like, the amount of times that his pitch shifts, or how his pitch is in high note but it's not quite high and then he shifts it to a higher note. Really impressive stuff. A bit of an underrated aspect of The Weeknd is how good of a singer he can be, and I think this track showcases that. Oh, talk about absolute pop perfection, my God. Talk about a bass groove, an absolute slick as hell, funky rhythm that just appeals to everything I love about pop music, man. If you're gonna make me a song and you've got a bit of a funky, nice little groovy backdrop to it, yeah, chances are I'm gonna like it, and Sacrifice is no exception to that rule at all. This track right here is so freaking good, my God. Absolutely adore this one. This, in a just world, would have been like that big hit that we saw from After Hours. You know, After Hours had so many massive hits. There were multiple tracks that went huge, that are some of the biggest songs ever. I don't understand why Sacrifice wasn't also added to that list of Weeknd hits, but I don't friggin' know. Maybe later down the line we'll see this happen for The Weeknd for this song. I don't know, maybe a TikTok hit at some point. I don't friggin' know these days. It's so hard to tell what's going to happen with certain songs. But it just seemed like such a dead set. This is going to be a smash hit, and it just wasn't that big. Gotta say, it's always baffled me, but friggin' hell, his vocals are so good. The way, the bridge of the song, where he's like, oh baby, that part is so good. Just every fibre of my being just absolutely lifts up whenever this song comes on. It's just an absolute rager of a tune. So friggin' good. Go tell your friends about it. Go tell your friends about it. This is probably going to be the surprise of the list. I feel like all my lists have that one surprise, or maybe there's been a few for people. But this being so high was a pretty big revelation to me. I've got to say, the Soul Dog sample is incredible on this track. Just absolutely takes The Weeknd's vision to another level for me. Just that repeated piano, just adds such a nice lift to the song, and adds a lot of dynamics to the track too that I feel is really good, and I think it just leads into the chorus so brilliantly. And yeah, The Weeknd is just really showing off a lot of charisma on this track. I feel like a lot of his vocal performances have a lot of going for them, but I feel like this track, it just has that energy, that cool slickness that he brings to the table so perfectly. And yeah, is so high up for me on this list. Like, I was surprised as well that I loved this song as much as I did, but when I was ranking the tracks, I couldn't lie to myself. I couldn't lie to myself how good this song sounds. It sounds cool as hell, and is my second favourite Weeknd song. Now we're at number 1, the best Weeknd track for me. We're about to get to it. Of course, as I've said, please check out my Patreon, please subscribe for more videos like this in the future. And of course, in the comments, tell me what your list would be as well. If my list is totally different to yours, I'd love to see it, because I'm sure there'll be a lot of people that think, where's this song? Where's that song? But for me personally, this is the best song that he's ever done. 'Cause I can't I mentioned in my Dawn FM review, and also the Songs of the Year video that I did for 2022, when I listed this as my favourite song of that year, that this song feels like another level for The Weeknd that we've never really heard before. There's something about this song that's just so powerful in a way that we have never really felt from The Weeknd before. Instrumentally, it sounds totally different. You know, it's so produced in such a smooth and clean way that I think it makes it stand out for all the right reasons. But I could imagine people hearing this and going, oh, this doesn't sound like The Weeknd I know. But when you kind of get into those lyrics and you get into those personal, just powerful lines that he comes through with on this track, you really start to identify and feel like you know The Weeknd more after hearing this track. It is just such a powerful moment from him that I still get dumbfounded by, because we never really felt like we were getting that upfront honesty where he's just unleashing everything about himself to the world and being honest just from start to end. You know, he never really will view himself as being less than zero. He'll always be that, because he's just never been good enough. He's never done the right things. He's made mistakes. And yeah, that to me, I think resonates in a hard way. And that, again, as I've said multiple times about the song, it just feels like a career all-timer for an artist. Maybe similar to something like a Sorry Not Sorry from Tyler, the Creator, where it's just like, holy shit, like this is self-aware on a level that we've never really seen from this artist before. And good God, it paid off, because you just feel like you connect a little bit more to who he is here in a way that maybe you never did before. I don't know, it's just such a beautiful moment. And yeah, the how euphoric this song is and how the instrumentation lifts, oh God, it's just so good. I love a song that has that euphoric sensation, that gives you that euphoric feeling. And this song does that. So there you go. This is, to me, the best ever Weeknd track. And yeah, that's my thoughts. And that is it from me. This is my list, my personal 10 favourites. As always, do remember it's my personal opinion. I'm not here definitively, objectively defining a top 10 here. If any one person could even do that, I'm not entirely sure. But this is just my personal picks, what I think is the best stuff. And yeah, we are potentially getting a third in the trilogy here. I'm hearing a lot of rumours about. If we do get that, maybe this list will look different down the line, because on the streak he's currently on, it wouldn't surprise me if he could top his last few albums, because he is on a hot streak right now. But for now, this is my list, my top 10 Weeknd tracks. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you've shared the video, liked the video. Please do that. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Have a good day. Subscribe, and goodbye.